Welcome back to Silent Sales Machine Radio. I'm your co host today. I'm Brian and joined today by Grant Douglas, who's one of the awesome coaches in the Jim Cockrum coaching program. Grant, I know you've been doing this full time for how long? A few years?
It'll be 4 years on Labor Day that I left my job.
Oh, wow. So, and you didn't like pick up any side work? I mean, if I remember right, you jumped into this and just screwed up.
Yeah, so my wife had we had our third kid in March of 2021. And the whole goal was to have a job that I could stay at home and be with him and be with the family more. And it doesn't always work out, but for me it did.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful for the risk I took to not do what is many times the smart thing, which is get a side hustle. Hey, stay with that job a little longer. Like that's when you can do that and do Amazon on the side. Like it helps money a little more.
Yeah.
But I dove straight in, took a chance, and I was able to come out on the other side okay. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Great success story there. And what I love is that you're really sharing what you've learned with, in some cases, with community, certainly with your coaching clients. But did you join the coaching program as a student?
no, so I learned about Amazon outside of my silent team and
That's what I thought.
and all that. But it was the podcasts that were the first thing that I listened to. And like anyone, you get gated in some brands, you start getting orders canceled from a website, and you
Hmm.
need to you were maybe doing something really well and that doesn't work anymore, and you got to find more strategies. And I search through the podcast to find out other ways and see what other people are doing. And hearing most people are really transparent about what's working with them on the podcast and how they source, and even specific Keepa product finder filters they may use. And
Hmm.
all of that was just so helpful to like keep, so the plane was already in the air, but it has kept the plane flying for the past 4 years because of podcasts like Jim's.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Well, the reason we're here today is to shed a little more light on the fairly recent bestseller rank adjustment that we've seen it become more visible on the Keepa charts lately, but this was a change Amazon made back in May, and we're kind of seeing it come to fruition now.
Yeah, and it's something that I sometimes we're talking about something kind of reactory, right? Like maybe it's been around the Amazon spaces for a couple years, and we don't want to share something until we have full understanding. This is a little bit of that, but honestly, like this is very, very new. This is something I have personally not shared with anyone except for you. And I talked about it a little bit at conference because I was like, hey, I'm kind of seeing this, but it was brand new at conference too. So I think this will be really beneficial and people will learn a lot of things. And I think a lot of kind of dots will get connected of things maybe other sellers have been seeing the past 2 months. And with some digging that you did and some DMs that we had, I think we kind of figured out what's been going on with Keepa and
Yeah.
why and how we can take that and help people with it.
I think you're right about the timing of the change. Best I can tell was sometime around mid-May, and we're at conference. Like I think it was what 24th or 25th, something like that. And
Mhm.
so I remember actually we were doing the workshop a few days before that, and I'm bringing up Keepa charts, and my mind is saying this doesn't look right.
Mhm.
Just in the last week, I'm like, this looks strange. And I just kind of let it go. I was like, oh, Keepa must be having some issues. And then, however many weeks later, I'm like, this still looks very strange, right? Compared to what we're used to seeing for the BSR activity on a Keepa chart. And finally, we started digging into it a little bit more, and we're able to get some confirmation from Keepa that Amazon changed the way that they're calculating that BSR.
Yeah, and I think as I've talked about with many people, other ways to know sales velocity besides sales rank, like full transparency. When I first started on Amazon, like that was without a doubt number one for me.
Yeah.
And the bought in the past month metric literally didn't exist, and so you had to drops was like a safe bet, and then you could infer some other data to know even more. But that was has been without a doubt the most crystal clear way of like, hey, it's at least selling this much, so why not go ahead? And I think that when I first messaged you about this, I was like, hey, I just looked at my 30 best ASINs, like literally the 30 ASINs that are making me the most money. And I think the number, more than half of them had less than 10 drops a month.
Yeah.
And that, like you said, was strange.
Yeah.
And some of them were still had 150 drops like normal. And so it was this weird dynamic of sometimes Keepa seems to be doing the same thing or a similar thing. And sometimes Keepa seemed to be tracking sales rank completely different, and it seemed to be random. And that's why I reached out to you and was like, wonder what's going on. Have you seen this? And I didn't realize you had to.
Yeah, it was one of those strange things where I was maybe a little afraid to say it out loud because I'm like, what am I missing here? Right. But things definitely did not look the same. And that metric that you're talking about, the bought in the past 30 days or sold in the last 30 days, I can't remember. I think it was a year ago, maybe a little bit more than a year ago that they started rolling that out.
Mhm.
And it's an awesome metric when it exists. And in the
Yeah.
early days, the majority of ASINs, even the top 1% or top one half of 1%, didn't have that quality, that attribute on them. So I didn't get too excited about it, but that has changed over time, over the last however long it's been. And now the majority of the ASINs that are in the top half of 1%, or depending on the category, the top 1% do have that metric. So it has been a game changer.
Yeah, for sure. So help me understand with, I know you lead the Kickstart program, and there's been a lot of people that have gone through that and then come to me as coaching students sharing, hey, this is what I learned the Kickstart program, and it's a solid base and a good fundamental start for them. But I've actually never been in the Kickstart program. So I'm really curious. Let's pretend it's prior to May,
Mhm.
and you've been looking at Keepa graphs and BSR for years. Previously, like what would be the advice that you would give a new seller of how to use the BSR the best to estimate velocity? Maybe we can like start there.
So first of all, credit to my wife, Robin Joy, who actually does run the Kickstart. I've never been through an entire one, but I through osmosis, right? We talk about it all the time. I'm pretty
Yeah.
familiar with what she's teaching over there. And prior to May, it has always been sales rank drops. And the reason for this is that as a newer seller coming in, everything is new. And Keepa, what is Keepa? What That's a silly name. What does that mean? And why do I even, and what does this chart mean? It doesn't even look like a stock chart, right? It looks completely different. And when you really start digging into it, you'll find, this, that there are hundreds of different metrics in there that you could use as evaluation tools. And the last thing that we wanted to do is overwhelm a new person with, here's the 140 points that, or however many, 400 that Keepa has. So get comfortable with this and then get started, because people will be in analysis paralysis forever. So we really tried to boil it down to we always say, like, historically, we have said a sales rank drop typically equals one or more sales, right?
Mhm.
And so that's pretty much what we were teaching. That's what Robin Joy was teaching in the Kickstart program.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say somewhere between over the past year, between July 2024
Mhm.
and July 2025, it used to be that 30 sales rank drops, there were more ASINs with 30 sales rank drops than there were ASINs with the 50 bought in the past month metric.
Yep.
And especially by May, it could have been even before then, but sometime over the past year that has changed. I think that's true, right? That you ran a report and there were actually
Mhm.
more ASINs with the 50 plus bought in the past month or more, right? Or 100 or 10,000, whatever it is, then there are ASINs with just 30 drops or more.
I actually have some data in front of me because I did this analysis. I think I shared this with you, but
Mhm.
for example, like in the arts, crafts, and sewing category, which is one of those categories that's open to newer sellers, there's 13.7 million products in there. The top 0.6%, which is a little more than the top half of 1%, has the bought in, 50 sold in. Whereas less than that, 0.4% actually has the 30 sales rank drops. So, and this is consistent across all the categories that I evaluated, which was 7 different ones, where we're getting many more ASINs that are in the top selling range that have the bought in figure than have sales rank drops. So that's been messing with a lot of people lately. Like, why can't I find as many ASINs that have the sales rank drops? And so that's why we wanted to get on here and talk about this and make sure that we're letting everyone know that number has been marginalized somewhat.
Yeah. So now that we know that, you just want to lay out now, or even some context with Keepa about what happened in May. We both. What's interesting is we both talked to them and we got similar but still slightly different responses.
Yeah.
But on my end, what they basically alluded to is that at some time in May, Amazon changed how they tracked BSR, which makes movement less likely to happen. And one thing that was really interesting in their response to me that I think maybe has been true forever, but I never knew it was true. I stated at conference in one of the breakout sessions I went to that different categories have different sales drops, meaning that 15 drops in one category may mean differently than 15 drops in another category. And the biggest reason for that is I thought because that category as a whole was scraped less than maybe a different category like clothing. Clothing is still lots and lots of sales rank drops, but
Hmm.
home and tools and home improvement, it seemed like was not. And it was like, okay, I guess it's by category. That's what I kind of gathered. Well, what they basically said, the frequency that we scrape is, I believe this is according to them, but is based off of the product and how tracked it is, how much people have interest in it. Because you actually can go on to Keepa, you can track a product, track it for price, go up and down. You can do this as a customer, or you can do it as an Amazon seller. And the products that are tracked more often, which means people want them more, are going to have more sales rate drops. And the ones that are less tracked, which could be the really good Asens, are going to have less sales rank drops. And that was brand new information that I was like, that's why have I never heard anyone talk about this? And why did Keepa not tell us this? And I'm sure there's many reasons why, but that blew my mind a little bit.
That was interesting that you did get that feedback in your communications with Keepa because they didn't mention that to me. But also when I was looking at an ACE, and it was last night or this morning when I was in a coaching session, when I was looking at a Keepa chart, there was a metric like how many people are tracking this, which I never really paid attention to before until, you shared the feedback that you got from Keepa. And so in fact, maybe I just had it open on a different picture. I was trying to find the one that I had open, but there was a metric like how many people are tracking it. Oh,
Mhm.
that's kind of interesting. Now, I don't know if we can filter on that. I haven't had time to go and dig into that, but that would be an interesting one to take a look at. Yeah. And so when I emailed Keepa, actually, I went to their forum and I just said, hey, things look different, right? This, I gave them basically a 90-day chart, and from May 15th through today, it looks different than it did, however, the 45 days from May 15th to the beginning of April. And does this change the way we should be interpreting the data? And they basically said it was Amazon who made the change. And so that's the reason the numbers look different, is because it's been smoothed out. So in other words, Amazon is taking more historical weight to the sales rank number and smoothing that out over time. And if I can just take it one step further, in other words, again, that the BSR is less susceptible to the way to game the system. And some of the ways that I've seen people game the system is through advertising campaigns, through a lot of off platform traffic that's coming in, sales, coupons, things like that that you can run on products. And when you do that, it'll dramatically, or can dramatically, change the sales velocity of a particular ASIN and subsequently the sales rank. But if that only lasts for 2 days, Amazon's not giving as much credit to that change, and they will normalize that back up to kind of where it tends to run normally.
Yeah. And so I know we're throwing out lots of data, lots of things that I'm very interested in. And
Mhm.
maybe others are like, okay, so if this is all true, like what does that mean? What's my takeaway from this? And I would say my summary of that with what that means with drops is drops are just going to be less consistent. Drops are going to be less reliable. If something does have 90 drops a month, it still is going to have at least 9 sales. But the problem is that something with 4 drops a month is probably going to have, it could have anywhere from 4 to 4,000 sales in a month. And there is luckily other ways to find out that that's true, but that drops is not the way to know if something is selling really, really well. It's just, it sometimes does, sometimes doesn't now.
So what's interesting to me about this, Grant, is if they are normalizing this, we can see it on multiple. We'll go take a look at most products. You're going to see the change in the way that those lines are being drawn. Is that the BSR that we used to sort of wave off, just in general, the actual number, because it was always a point in time number, right? And
Hmm.
you could be. I was given an example this morning where the rank of a product was 270,000. I'm sorry, it was over 400,000 yesterday, and today, or within this period of time I was looking at, in one day it dropped to 70. So it changed dramatically in one day. So if
Hmm.
and they're normalizing that out now so that it's more flat. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the BSR, the old school BSR charts, which may have already been gone by the wayside by the time you started, they pretty much were for me too, because everyone said, it's a point in time. It can change so dramatically, it doesn't really matter. Perhaps those are going to be much more useful now going forward, where if it's in a certain rank range that we can get an approximation of estimated sales that's going to be more meaningful than drops.
Yeah, 100%. Sales rank is something like a consistent sales rank has always mattered. But you're right. Like a snapshot in time, if you're sourcing in store and you're just scanning it and it says a low sales rank, high sales rank, like you could be off. And now, though, what we're saying is if you are seeing a product in store and the sales rank is, top 0.25%, it's more likely to have stayed there and it's more reliable. Should you use other information to make sure? Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you're going to see that that is much more consistent. And you're right. When I first started, I remember when I first was in the community, someone shared us. They took a snapshot of an old OA course that I don't even think is in existence anymore on the PAC course. And it was that based off of this sales rank, this is how many sales you can expect per the category.
Mhm.
And basically the response, and I believe it was Jim that commented on that and said, hey, this is honestly like useless now. And in which it, maybe not useless, but not the most helpful thing, right? And now though, I would say there's a chance that we could reconstruct said same chart and it is one way that could be very useful for sellers. Still not the most useful way, in my opinion, but one way, one data point that absolutely does matter and will help you do it. But just to give context, before the bot in the past month, I have one time in my life bought a pallet of inventory, which was it was hundreds of units with just going off a sales rank. And it was this line of products that it was a 3-digit sales rank in the category. And so I found someone else that still had these sales rank charts and was like, hey, that should be selling this much. And I was like, okay, I'll buy a pallet. Still a little risky, but now, hey, maybe there's some scenarios that sales rank can be helpful to us now, like you're saying.
Yeah. So, in addition to, well, if drops are less meaningful, perhaps the sales rank number is more meaningful, and the bought in the past 30 days is maybe our number one indicator. I know you've got some supporting indicators that you've shared in some other places, but without, like, here's the thing, I don't want to overwhelm newer sellers, like have to make them feel like they need the PhD in Keepa before they can actually get started. So this is the reason that we like the sold in the last month as a pretty solid metric, as long as it's been consistent. But you've got some other indicators, maybe secondary indicators that you like. You want to chat about those?
Yeah, I would say, like you said, number one. So if you are just a brand new seller and you're just scared if something sells what you think it sells, number one indicator absolutely is bought in the past month. That metric only starts at 50. So if it sold, and now I'm convinced that this again, we would have to get a response from Amazon, and I don't think they're going to respond, but I'm convinced that is orders in the past month. And the reason I say that is there's some things that I sell that's for businesses that say that it sells 100 times in the past month, and I've sold like maybe 150, and I'm sharing the buy box with
Ah,
people, and it
yeah.
has a lot of multiple units. So
Okay.
not to get, again, I said I would simplify this, and I'm confusing
No,
people again.
that's fair.
But
Yeah.
number one thing bought in the past month, if you see that and it says 50 plus, 100 plus, 200 plus, whatever it says, that is the most reliable metric. I would say if you want to have because there's sometimes I've seen it glitch. The most often I've seen it glitch is in the grocery category, where there's something with a really high sales rank that was probably like a variation that got like separated and it
Mhm.
just still is tracking old data. But if it sells, it has the gold bars, 50 plus more, and it's in the top 1% in the category, I'd say you're pretty golden. That's about as safe as you can be to make sure there is velocity. And then
Yep.
the supporting evidence with that is kind of like I said, the top 1% of the category. If you see movement in the new seller count, so the third Keepa graph, if you have three pulled up on your web browser, if you are seeing sellers go up and sellers go down, especially sellers go down, because if a listing did have 10 sellers and now it has 9, the most reasonable thing to assume is that they sold out of all their inventory. So that means a sale happened. And yeah, I think that that's probably that kind of triad of bought in the past month. Oh, I missed one. So bought in the past month is number one, and the triad of new seller account movement, of knowing the sales rank top 1%, and eventually just start looking at what the sales rank of this. Hey, this thing sold out. Like I sold all 10 in a 1 week period, and then oh, well, that sales rank in grocery is 5,000. Hey, maybe everything that's around that rank moves that fast. It probably does. And then the third of the secondary things, in addition to sales rank and new seller count for me, would be reviews or ratings if it's a variation. But both of those, a review is low end, a guaranteed like 50 sales. On the high end, one review could be 200 sales. Why do we kind of know this? Well, look at your seller account. And if you could calculate how many, I think I get a review for every like 350 sales that I make. And that kind of is where the listing is lots of times. If you see reviews going up, sellers going down because they're selling out, and a sales rank drop in the top 1%, man, there's 3 additional supporting information that you have. And then probably you can throw drops in there too. It still matters. If you see 50 drops, that's some more data just to make you feel better about your purchase.
Yeah, that's good. I would add one thing to that for me, which is if it has a buy box, that there's buy box fluctuations happening there, because that typically is also an indicator of sellers moving in and out. Like I sold out, boom, now the buy box goes to the person who was above me. I mean, hopefully not. Hopefully it goes to somebody who is below
Yeah.
me in pricing. But yeah, that can also be a good indicator. And I'm curious about your take on the reviews versus ratings. I know it's a little off topic, but how do you do your evaluation there?
So I'm going to try to repeat some information I just heard recently and take this as just my opinion and not as for sure true. But apparently now you can leave a rating without leaving a review. And you can now leave a rating, I think possibly even without purchasing it. I heard this from someone last time, but it is easier now to leave a rating than it was before. That is the information that I was told by a different Amazon seller. Therefore, if you look on variations, especially, you're going to see more ratings than you will review. Way more ratings than there are review on some of them. And so for both of those, and I tell new sellers, if the rating's below 3.5, don't touch it. It's probably going to get returned a lot. It's going to be a mess. People just don't like the product if it's that low. If it's ever in the twos, like I don't care if profits $20. I am not touching because of that. So that rating is out of 5, and 2.5 out of 5 is horrible as far as Amazon's concerned. But as far as the number ratings that you could either see, on the listing or on the variations tab, that's reliable. Sort that by ratings, sort that by reviews. They will normally coincide, but because sometimes you might see, hey, this variation has 3 reviews, this one has 1. It's not like a ton to go off of, but maybe the ratings, there's 24 ratings and 22. Okay, well, that tells us that there's people that are giving feedback on this. And yeah, absolutely, ratings would be a good one too to go off of, especially for variations.
So yeah, I mean, I used both of those are really what I'm using for, other than the overall star rating, but what I'm using for variation analysis. But just to maybe give some more credence to the ratings, yes, you can give a rating without having to go online. In fact, if you have an Amazon Alexa device, mine asks me all the time, last week you purchased blah, blah, blah. How many stars would you give it? And you just tell it 4 stars and it says, thank you. And I'm assuming that's what goes into, at least contributes to the overall ratings. So normally I'm like, ratings are newer. And so the count is not on some listings, not as high as reviews. And I also put a little less weight overall in them in terms of Well, you can't, all you can give it is a star value. So, but it's a count of an additional rating, which helps. So I guess that's kind of my addition to that. But I think what I'd like to do is, I don't, did we call it A9 and A10 when we first started? I don't even remember the ranking algorithm that Amazon has.
Yeah, I think I honestly didn't. I saw they're now on A10, and I was like, I didn't know what A we were on.
Yeah,
So
I quite honestly, I didn't either. I know I've heard people talk about it. You can really nerd out on this stuff, especially when you get into Rufus and some of the other AI that is coming into play with Amazon now. But just real quickly, A9 is kind of the old ranking algorithm, A10 is the new ranking algorithm, and this update to A10, it's actually designed to work in our favor as sellers. Because I kind of alluded to it earlier that with the old ranking system and perhaps even the earlier versions of A10, the sales rank and the overall ranking system was subjected to ways that you could work the system. And so this is meant to flatten this out. So if you are on a listing or you create a listing, if you're even doing private label, the overall ranking of that product is going to be less influenced by ads, by keyword stuffing, by traffic that you may be bringing in from offsite, and more strongly weighted in the overall trust value or the rating or the reviews for that particular ASIN, which sellers are selling on that ASIN, and some other things like that. But hopefully this kind of levels the playing field a little bit so we're not all subjected to a lot of manipulation that we've seen on the platform before.
yeah, and I think this also, this type of clarity, it levels the playing field for new sellers as opposed to seasoned sellers. Like it used to be the wild wild west on Amazon where, here's me having to buy a pallet of inventory based on something that only has like 30 drops, but there's no bought in the past month and there's no this. Keepa keeps giving us more data and more reliable data to go off of. That bought in the past month was huge.
Yep.
Tons of things that really smart Amazon sellers thought was true, they were confirmed. Okay, I was right all along, but unfortunately now everybody knows. And so I hope that this is encouraging for new sellers that, hey, this bought in the past month, this is reliable data. Hey, this sales rank, this is more reliable data. And if you are just a new Amazon seller and you want to know exactly like what I'm looking at when I see a new listing, where my eyes go, how I make decisions on velocity, it's, hey, number one, hey, there's a bought in the past month. Hey, the sales rank is within reason of what I would expect for that, top 1%, maybe 0.5% if it's even higher. Hey, I'm going to buy it. I don't really, my eyes might look at the other stuff just to make sure there's nothing weird on the chart, but typically that's going to make me buy it if it's profitable. And then, let's say that there is no bought in the past month. Well, we have a triad of things we can check, or 4 or 5 if you really want to get in deeper. If it's a single listing, no variation, and the reviews are going up, seller counts going up and down, sales rank is in the top 1%. Even if drops or 2, I'm actually going to disregard that. And I'm going to say, I saw these other 3 things that are telling me that this is enough to test. When you have 5 secondary metric and they're all lining up, of course, test it. But there are some scenarios that you just have a couple things that are saying that maybe the sales rank is in A and the bought in the past month is in A, but reviews are going up a little bit and there's some seller count movement. Maybe not something that a brand new seller would buy, but if you're an experienced seller, that's something you can still test. And again, make more money because others aren't testing it.
Yeah. To be fair, Grant, you kind of surfaced this in the My Silent Team community months ago, right? Maybe 6 months ago or more, where you're like, something's not lining up here. Like I'm on listings where the drops, it says 5, 6, 10, whatever, and I'm selling 100 units or 30 units a month or something like that. And so, you called out that it's not always a one-to-one, which I think, is fair. And all these are indicators. The only way you're going to know for sure is to actually, test it and send some items in.
Yeah.
But you brought up something else that was interesting to me that, you were saying that, experienced sellers are saying, oh, this confirms, or darn it, now everyone knows the trick, right? One of the strategies I cover in the Keepa 360 course is how do you identify these listings that don't have sales rank but still sell? The
Mhm.
most obvious one in my mind right now is there's no sales rank, but they're sold in the last 30 days data.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's you can do keep a product finder and just search those two things. Hey, no sales rank, put sell 50 plus. I mean, there's
Yeah.
I don't have it in front of me, but I venture to guess there's if you don't do a certain category,
Yeah.
there's hundreds of thousands, possibly a million that
Yeah.
sell without a sales rank. And yeah, so that's why I think it was Ryan Otwell that said this in that post I made, kind of talking about hey, drops I'm a little less reliable with. He said no data is irrelevant. It's like a collectiveness of the data. All the things that we listed, all six of those things that you can
Hmm.
use to figure out velocity,
Yeah.
all of them either further support or give you caution on whether to know the velocity of it.
Yeah.
And so they all, and that's what we're doing as Amazon sellers. We're betting on the future that we think that this product will or won't be profitable by the time it's checked in at Amazon, and we can use all of these metrics to better bet on it and get a more accurate reading of if we think we're going to make money on it. And we, as Amazon sellers, we have to become really good bettors. And the
Yeah.
better we are at predicting what happens in a month, the more money that we're going to make.
And the best experience is going to be your best, I don't know, gut feel or whatever. But since you brought up the bet, we have to bet on it. It's one of the things I
Mhm.
always like to say. Let's stack the deck in our favor, right?
Yeah.
And so the more of these metrics that you can gain over time, and the more experience you can get. Like one of the things that I think is challenging for newer sellers is because there are so many metrics that you can take a look at. They're basically a lot of them are meaningless until you become one of the sellers on that listing. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden you see yourself and you see how things start moving and then things start to come to life. And so you can start to use that. So I say the experience is maybe the best teacher there, but you can start to use that in future decisions. And then it's less like a bet and more like, I know how this is going to work out. Not all, there are no guarantees, but
Yeah, this is a bet, but we're the house, right?
that's
We
right.
we
There you
are
go.
we have the odds
Yeah.
in our favor. That's where this comes in. And
Yeah.
you're exactly right. We can throw out all these data. Now, this is data that I look at for selling on new ASINs. You want to know the best data for replenishments, the best data
Mhm.
for where to find more ASINs. It's your own data. It's your own information. It's how
Yeah.
many you sold the past 7 days. It's
Mhm.
it's the sales rank of that one that you did sell. It's how when you unexpectedly sell a lot of something you didn't think would, you're looking at your data. And if it's sold, it's probably going to sell in the future. And regardless of what drops say, regardless of if there's bought in the past month, I have sold more than 50 in a month of something that has no bought in the past 50 months. Am I going to now, like, well, why would I send in 50? It says it doesn't sell. No, I sold 50. So
Yeah.
it sells that and it sells more. My data is the best data. Only way to get your own data is to test a bunch of ASINs and test
That's right.
test small, test wide, and then when it works out well, see what that Keepa chart looks like and find more ASINs that are like that or similar.
Yep. Yep. You're right on. Well, I think we've covered this from most of the angles. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up?
No, I think that's it. So for those that use the three-step check, right?
Mm.
And I don't know when this will be updated or if it has already been updated. And there's without a doubt, there's new sellers, right, that are relying on that. What is because velocity is one of those, right?
Mhm.
So what would make that light up and say velocity is a go now on the three-step check?
Great question. So just to set the premise here, we teach the three-step check. It's really without getting overwhelmed, what pieces of data do you need to know before you would test an item? And the number one check is sales velocity. And it's the number one check because the other two often don't matter, which I'll get to in a second, if there's no sales velocity. So the second one is capital protection. Like we want to make sure that we've got evidence that this thing, we're going to be able to recoup all of our capital. No guarantees, but against the deck is stacked in our favor. And then the third part is the potential profit. Like, is there room between my break even and where this thing is, has historically sold or looks like it sold for me to make profit? And so what we've done, Grant, and thanks for setting me up for this, is we basically took out sales rank drops and we put in sold in the last 30 days. And then some if that doesn't exist. But we didn't have it if it didn't exist with the 30 sales rank drops. specifically called out. But I think it can be helpful to have some of these secondary indicators like that. So just because it doesn't have sold in the last 30 days data doesn't mean that it may not, like you called out, may not be testable.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's good. And that's the words that I use for new students is I don't want to call this Grant's two-step check, but
Yeah.
it is it profitable
Yeah.
and does it sell?
Yeah.
And really you added a third one to help new sellers make
Yeah.
sure that their limited amount of money that they probably have to have with inventory, because as I've shared before with some people, most new sellers don't have 50K to spend, or else we would probably not be doing Amazon. There's some other stuff we could do and find ways to use our money, but
Uh-huh.
we want to either get out of debt or we want to build assets. That's why we're here as Amazon sellers. That third metric of capital protection is great for new sellers to make sure they're not making mistakes and making good choices with their money early on.
Yeah, we just wanted some way to help people be able to pull the trigger with confidence, right?
Mhm.
It's when everything is new, you tend to, just be overly cautious. Some people, not everybody. Like I wouldn't say I was overly cautious, but I also wasn't super, into taking huge risks. But when I started,
Yeah.
I was like, here's my money. I'm going to go put it to use. And I learned lessons with that. But like 6 months later, I had gotten enough experience that I didn't even hesitate about putting additional money into the business, right?
Yeah. No,
So,
that's good. So I think we covered it all.
okay.
What is the case with any of these podcasts is if you have follow-up questions, I mean, just post it in the main Silent Team
Mhm.
Facebook group. If you
Yep.
specifically want to ask one of us, just tag us and we'll
Yep.
eventually see it, and or just create some discussion with other people, and if this is not helpful at all, just let us know and we'll pull the episode. But I do
Yeah.
think we added some clarity to some
Yeah.
things. Hopefully it'll help a lot of people.
No, that's awesome. Grant, I just want to say thanks for coming on. I really I see the value you bring to the community. You got a great big picture approach, as well as a lot of great tactics and perspectives on it. So, yeah, love working with you here in this group. And thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it. Same to you. Thanks for having me here.
I got to close it out with the normal tagline, which is you mentioned it earlier, right? How do we the best information, the best data points that we have comes from what
Our
our
own data.
our own data, right? And the only way we get our own data is to test more ASINs. So, all right, we'll talk to you soon, everyone. Have a great day.
Hey, thanks for joining us for today's program, but we've got a little special announcement for you before I let you go. So stick with us. I've got Jeff Schick. He's our resident expert for all things Amazon, Walmart, e-commerce policy and legal. He's always got a good tip or insight for us. What have you got for us today, Jeff?
Well, hey, thanks for having me on today. So yeah, what we've got today to talk about is some of our e-commerce myths that we've been encountering with our clients. And so, one of the greatest myths that I see going around in a lot of online communities is the idea that the IP complaint is the greatest threat to a business. So I'll see, day in and day out, you see posts of people saying, my business is healthy because I don't have any IP complaints. But they think that that's all that matters, or, hey, this brand doesn't issue IP complaints, so it's totally safe to sell. There's nothing to worry about. So I really wanted to just dive into the idea that, there are other threats besides IP complaints, both from an account health perspective or even, like selling a product perspective. So yeah, just wanted to kick off that subject matter.
Yeah, so I know IP is a famous and popular one to kick around and discuss, and I feel like we've gotten pretty good as an industry, as a community of dealing with those the vast
Yeah.
majority of the time, especially if they have you on retainer, which we'll talk more about that before we wrap up today. But what else are you seeing? What perspective should we have in regards to the other threats?
Well, a lot of times, so people focus so much on the IP complaint that they overlook the more basic things that can actually threaten their business. I mean, number one thing that we still deal with that can be a complete business killer is, listing on products that have the wrong brand name or that are listed as generic. And I know we've talked about that years ago as a problem, and it still is. Those listings still exist on Amazon to this day, and people get tied up in listing under the wrong product. Similarly, we have, like there's risks in the types of products that people carry. So, like for, one of the examples I'll talk about is like life safety devices, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors. Those products are not risk free and they may have a good ROI, but with a good ROI comes a very high risk profile. So for people that are more risk averse, you may want to think about the types of products you're selling in addition to whether the brand issues IP complaints and things like that.
Understood. And maybe even adjust your insurance as well, which we have great sponsors for that as well, insuring different types of products at different levels of risk. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely want to talk to Ashland before you start listing, smoke detector, for instance, because, unfortunately, product liability law in the United States is what's called strict liability. And so it means that if you have a product that is defective, and defective is kind of an interesting one because defective is defined three ways in the United States law. Defective design and engineering, meaning it could have been engineered to be safer. Defective manufacturing, meaning that it was manufactured according to specs that were safe, but that there was a manufacturing glitch, like maybe they forgot to connect one of the battery wires or something like that. And then the third one, which is the one I like to hate on the most, is failure to warn. So not putting enough warning labels on something. But all of those make, any of those types of violations are treated the same, and it makes the seller, so anyone that touched that product in the supply chain. So, you as the seller, Amazon, because they handled it, UPS even could have some liability if they took your package. You bought it from Home Depot, they've got liability, their vendor has liability, and then the manufacturer has liability. So
Interesting. I know you've got quite a few clients. Have you dealt with any of those where the seller was held responsible for a malfunction of a safety related product? Is that in your purview?
we haven't had a safety related issue, thank God, because that would probably have involved loss of life, or at least extreme property damage. But we have had, we did have a seller who sold a defective water filter that flooded somebody's kitchen and basically caused like $40,000 worth of damage to their house. So that was that was an interesting case. And then we've also had cases of, private label sellers. For instance, we had one of our private label sellers was selling a kitchen item that was chopped somebody's finger off. So it's, so there's definitely some things we did, I've given also the example before of we had a reseller who sold their first product ever and didn't have insurance. And the product it was a cosmetic that caused the person to go to the hospital when they used it. And so the seller had to pay the person's hospital bill because the person who went to the hospital did not have health insurance, and the seller didn't have business insurance to pay for it either. So the seller had to personally write a check.
Wow. Wow. That's crazy. So these are the kind of reasons why these and many others would hire you guys to help navigate the risk profile, I guess, of the products you're considering selling. Is that
Absolutely.
something that you guys do for your clients?
We do, especially so if people are thinking about private label, we always tell them, hey, let's talk about it, because product safety can be the biggest killer to a private label brand, and a really fast killer too, from a private label perspective. And then also even from an arbitrage perspective, because sometimes sellers will find these killer deals, and we just, we'll talk it through and, make sure that it actually matches with what the seller is comfortable taking on risk wise, and making sure that they've got, all their ducks in a row. Like, we're not going to write the insurance policy. That's Ashland's work, but we're happy to help talk about what you need to talk to her about to make sure you've got.
Outstanding. Yeah. It just opens up. I like this topic today because it opens up the possibilities of the unknowns. I would say the vast majority of what we deal with probably is IP complaints, but
Right.
there's other things going on and huge benefits to putting you guys on retainer, paying a very small amount monthly, and then you handle these things and help people navigate these questions and make sure they avoid the traps that are out there. So jeffschick.com, spelled just like the razor, SCHICK, jeffschick.com. Get over there, put these guys on retainer. If you're serious at all about your business, you'll be shocked how low the price is. And you can rest better at night knowing that you've got some pros, Amazon policy, legal. Just really appreciate you guys. You've been serving our community so well for a long time. And this was a great topic, I think, today. Any other notes before we let you go for the day?
I think, we covered a lot. I appreciate you guys having us on. And yeah, I guess, the big things for sellers, just think beyond obviously Keepa graphs are important, but think beyond IP, think about all the other risk factors when listing products, because, especially if if you're deciding between two products, like you might be looking at a blender on the one side of the TJ Maxx aisle, and looking at a pair of Nike socks on the other side, one of those is going to be significantly more risky to sell than the other. So, if they both have the same profit margin, it may make sense to go with the less risky item.
Exactly. Although, I have heard of people getting injured because they wore two left-footed socks instead of the left and the right. People sue for weird things. No, I'm just kidding. It's an old runner joke.
Oh, okay.
Get the
I was
socks on the right
say.
feet. But it's yeah, people can sue for anything. So yeah, being covered. And this has actually turned into a little bit of a plug for our mutual good friend Ashlyn Haddon at ecom.insure as well, another great sponsor of our show. But yeah, appreciate you, Jeff, and I'll have you back next week if you're around. All right.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Talk to you soon.
Okay.